There is a quiet that comes after the mail slot clacks and the fridge hums. An ordinary evening in a house that has held birthdays, mortgage payments, and the slow accumulation of worry. You sit at the kitchen table, a stack of envelopes like small, accusing mountains, a damp mug cooling between your hands. Photographs on the wall show children growing into adults, a once-new car now showing the miles of commutes and errands. You breathe, and the breath catches on numbers you don't fully understand anymore. Interest, minimums, due dates. It feels endless, as if every choice nudges you deeper into a tunnel with no light. Across town, in a small, sunlit office lined with notebooks and coffee rings, I've sat with people like you, men and women in their late 30s to mid-60s, whose lives are rich in love and short on financial clarity. I don't need a miracle, one woman told me, voice low, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. I just need a way out that won't break my family. That sentence has guided me ever since. There's hard truth here, but also a steady possibility. Debt is not a moral failing. It's a problem to be solved with a map, not a magic trick. Tonight, I want to invite you to look with me at the map. We'll name what's real, the obligations, the fears, the small decisions that became habits, and we'll find the first foothold that turns momentum away from panic and toward progress. This isn't about quick fixes or austerity that strips joy. It's about careful, durable changes that rebuild freedom step by step. If any of this lands with you, tap like so others in this same room can find it too. Tell me, what's your biggest financial struggle right now? Comment below because your answer will shape what we do next. Stay with me for the first concrete move, the one small, specific shift that breaks the cycle of guessing and gives you a plan you can actually follow. In the next minute, we begin that step together. The evening light slants through a kitchen window as Maria spreads a lifetime of paper across the table. Credit card statements, medical bills, a faded mortgage notice. Her husband, Paolo, rubs his forehead, and their teenage daughter watches from the doorway, curiosity mingled with worry. We never thought it would get like this, Maria says, voice quiet. I sit down beside them, not with judgment but with a calm clipboard and a simple question. Show me everything you owe, and tell me what you want your life to feel like in 5 years. The room tightens, then breathes. Naming the numbers makes the anxiety real, but also suddenly manageable. Across town, in a small living room that still smells faintly of a child's shampoo, Tom, a 52-year-old electrician, opens his laptop. I've been putting off this spreadsheet for months, he admits. I walk him through the first, most important step. List every obligation, interest rate, and minimum payment. His shoulders drop when he sees the total. It's not smaller, he says, but now I can see it. In that plain spreadsheet, a seed of control is planted. I explain the rule I use with every family I meet. Transparency before strategy. When you can no longer ignore the map, you stop wandering aimlessly. Over the next few meetings, the scenes shift. A late-night session over instant coffee where we separate needs from wants. A quiet moment where a woman in her 60s deletes forgotten subscriptions and celebrates a small, symbolic victory. A husband and wife who finally speak without blaming, because the numbers are impersonal and the plan is shared. Dialogue becomes the bridge. Can we protect our retirement? She asks. Yes, if we prioritize differently. I reply, tracing a path with a pen. This part of the journey is slow and intimate, not dramatic leaps, but steady habit changes. One emergency jar, one renegotiated interest rate, one negotiated payment plan. Momentum builds not from magic, but from repeated, sensible choices. Which bill keeps you awake at night tonight? Tell me in the comments, and if you want to follow a step-by-step map that hundreds of families have used to make escape inevitable, stay with me. Subscribe and we'll walk the framework together in the next section. The kitchen light is soft, early evening settling like a question mark over the table. A stack of envelopes leans like a small, tired skyline. The calculator's screen blinks zeros back at them. He rubs his temple. She keeps her thumb tracing the rim of a coffee mug, both carrying the same quiet fear. Years of small compromises have built a mountain that now feels immovable. I sit across from them, not as a judge but as someone who's watched this pattern enough to know where it bends. "How did we get here?" he asks, voice low. She answers without looking up. "One emergency at a time." That line lands. It is the exact sound of millions of households in midlife. I lean in and say, let's name what we're carrying. Not to shame it, only to see it. When you can see the pieces, you can choose which to move. I ask them to spread the papers on the table. It sounds simple, but the ritual matters. Each bill becomes a fact, not a ghost. We map due dates into one ordered column, separate high-interest debts from low, and ring a bright, honest bell around what is non-negotiable for daily life. The mood shifts, skepticism softens into focus. "You mean there's a plan for this?" she whispers. "There is. A framework, precise and humane, that replaces chaos with sequence. Stop the leaks, prioritize the worst interest, build a tiny defendable buffer, then create momentum with concentrated payments and smart income moves." I show them examples from other families. The mechanic who reclaimed evenings from overtime because he restructured a loan. The teacher who negotiated bills and found $300 a month she didn't know she had. These are not miracles. They're step-by-step habits. A weekly money check-in, a simple spending rule for 2 months, and a slightly bolder move to increase cash flow where it makes sense. They try one step on the spot. Shifting a credit card auto payment to free a single minimum payment. A small victory that makes their shoulders drop an inch. Relief arrives slowly, like a door opening. "So this isn't about deprivation," he says. "It's about direction." "Exactly," I answer. "Which of these feels hardest for you to face? If the scene mirrors your nights, tell me in the comments. And if this method resonates, tap like so others can find it, and subscribe to keep walking the map with us. Next, we'll take that framework and apply it to a real month plan you can start this week. The living room is quiet except for the soft tick of a wall clock and the shuffle of envelopes on the kitchen table. A man in his late 40s pushes his glasses up and admits, almost apologetically, "I stopped looking 3 years ago." Across from him, a woman in her 50s unfolds a budget she hasn't touched since her divorce. The guide sits with a calm presence, the kind that says you've been seen and you are not alone. He doesn't promise miracles. He asks for truth. "Show me every bill, every minimum payment, every loan interest rate," the parts people hide from themselves. They begin at the table, under the warm yellow of a lamp, turning paper into a map. The habit of avoidance cracks the moment totals are written plainly. Faces soften. The sharp edge of shame dulls into focused concern. "So this is what we work with," the guide says, tracing lines between credit card balances, car payments, and a student loan carried like an old scar. He teaches a simple first move. List, prioritize, and choose one binding action. Not an overhaul, but a decisive first shove. As days pass, small scenes of trial and triumph unfold. One client calls from her car, voice trembling with disbelief. "I negotiated my interest." They agreed. Another shows up with a jar and a sticky note. "No spend challenge. Groceries only." The guide praises these micro wins and connects them to a larger rhythm. Consistency beats urgency. He places equal weight on numbers and the mind. "Debt isn't only a ledger," he tells them. "It lives in the stories you tell about worth and fear." He coaches brief rituals, a weekly check-in, a no-blame budget review, that turn good intentions into predictable progress. Conflict remains. Unexpected expenses, old habits, and the tempting ease of minimum payments test resolve. The guide responds with steady questions that sharpen choices. What gives you more freedom next month? One smaller payment or a dinner out? Conversations at night shift from dread to calculation, from helplessness to strategy. When someone laughs at how simple a step felt, the room breathes. By the end of the stretch, patterns are visible and the road less foggy. The guide leans in. The framework that removes guesswork is ready to be revealed. What's the single biggest money habit holding you back? If you want to keep walking this path, stay with us. The next step changes everything. The room is quiet except for the soft tick of a wall clock and the occasional scrape of a pen across paper. A middle-aged woman, Maria, sits at her kitchen table, a stack of bills fanned out like a hand she can't quite fold. Across from her, Tom rubs his temples, The weekend newspaper folded to the sports page, he no longer reads the same way. The guide leans forward, not with a lecture but with a steady presence, and says, "Tell me the truth about one thing you're avoiding." Maria exhales. "I don't open some of these statements anymore. It's easier not to know." Tom nods, ashamed and relieved at the same time. This is where the map appears. Not a spreadsheet of complex formulas, but a calm, 5-part framework that removes the guesswork. The guide draws nothing on a board, he sketches it in words. First, face the ledger. List every obligation, interest rate, and monthly minimum. Second, build a tiny buffer. $500 to start so emergencies don't reroute progress. Third, prioritize by cost. Attack the highest interest debt or, if momentum matters more, the smallest balance first. Fourth, automate dignity. Set small automatic transfers to savings and debt each payday so your future self isn't negotiating with anxiety. Fifth, grow the margin. Small, steady income tweaks or reallocations that turn a static budget into a rising tide. You'll have bad days, the guide admits, but a simple rhythm changes the story. He walks them through a scene. A Sunday, they label envelopes in the kitchen for essentials, wants, debt, and buffer. They put a $50 automatic transfer on Friday payroll. They schedule a 10-minute weekly check-in over coffee. Maria's shoulders loosen when the first $50 moves out, an almost comical small victory that tastes like air. Tom laughs at himself when he realizes the smallest debt is within sight of being paid off in 3 months. The conversation is humane, peppered with practical lines. Call the card company and ask for hardship options. Round up payments by $5. Sell one subscription and protect 2 hours a night of learning. There's a gentle invitation now. If this clarity resonates, hit like and tell us. What's the one number that scares you most? If you want the next step where we build a concrete 30-day action plan and claim the first win, make sure you're subscribed. In the next part, they take the ledger to the bank and set the first automatic transfer, an ordinary act that begins to feel like reclaiming a life. The table was small, the kitchen light low, but the scene felt enormous. A stack of envelopes, a laptop with a spreadsheet, and Maria's hands trembling around a mug of coffee. Across from her, Tom rubbed his forehead, the lines at his temples deeper than the bills. I sat with them, not as a stranger but as someone who's seen this moment 100 times, the first honest reckoning. "Tell me every debt," I said. "No filters." Maria read aloud, voice steadying with each number. Speaking names takes power away from fear. We moved slowly, step by step. First, the list: account, balance, interest rate, minimum payment. Then priority with a quiet rule: protect the essentials, attack the highest rate monsters, and carve out a tiny emergency seed. $30, then $50. Tom looked skeptical. "That won't fix anything," he murmured. I leaned forward. "It's not about magic. It's about momentum." He still had his doubts, but when Maria marked the first credit card as Target One, she smiled like someone reclaiming a small piece of ground. That night, they practiced the script I'd taught dozens of families. A calm, prepared call to a creditor, the numbers at your fingertips, the tone steady. The creditor offered a hardship plan. It wasn't heroic, but it cut the interest and bought breathing room. Maria whispered, "We'll be okay." That whisper sounded like a promise. Over the next weeks, we built rituals. A weekly money meeting with coffee and no interruptions. A no-spend Saturday once a month. A jar for spare change that 2 days later held enough for gas. Neighbors noticed the lighter step on the porch. Tom's workday felt less dragging because he had a plan to funnel modest overtime into the snowball. Small wins stacked into confidence. You don't need perfect income or a miracle. You need a map, a rhythm, and the willingness to keep the practice when impatience knocks. Which of these small habits could you start tonight? A list, a call, or a $30 emergency seed? If this resonates, press like and stay with us. Subscribe quietly and walk the next mile with the people who will teach you how to turn this momentum into lasting prosperity. The real challenge, turning short-term wins into a lifetime of freedom, is what comes next. The room is quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the late-night glow from a single lamp. Maria spreads her bills across the kitchen table like a small city of paper. Credit card statements, a student loan notice, the car payment envelope. Across from her, her husband Carlos rubs his temples. "I don't even know which one to attack first," he says, voice low. The guide sits with them, not as an expert lecturing from a pedestal but as someone who has walked this path and can see the map clearly. He leans forward and says, "We begin with truth. List every debt, the interest, the minimum. Then pick a method you can live with, snowball for momentum, avalanche for speed. But the real work is what you do after the first win." We follow them through the next weeks. Early mornings with a coffee and a spreadsheet. A Saturday money date where they celebrate small victories. The nervous call Carlos makes to negotiate a lower rate. The quiet pride when Maria packs a box of things to sell and turns them into the emergency cushion that once felt impossible. The camera lingers on small rituals. An envelope marked freedom, filling with dollars. A calendar where each paid-off day is circled in green. The guide coaches with steady, plain-spoken wisdom. Automate what you can, protect the basics, and invest your discipline into predictable habits. Momentum is not magic, he says. It's habit plus faith in a plan. We meet others at the same table of life. Lena, 52, whose first paid-off card made her cry. Daniel, 47, who asked for a raise after reframing his value and used the extra income to accelerate payments. Their voices mix with instructions: prioritize, consolidate when sensible, keep an emergency buffer, and with the deeper work, changing the story you tell yourself about money. Instead of shame, they cultivate curiosity and small, steady celebration. By the end of this block, the tunnel begins to widen. The next step isn't a sprint. It's the art of turning momentum into permanence. What is the one debt you'd tackle first if you had a clear, kind plan? If this landed for you, tap like, share your answer below, and stay with us. Next, we build the defenses that keep prosperity from slipping back into your life. The night the first payoff cleared, Maria sat at the kitchen table under the soft yellow of a reading lamp, a stack of envelopes beside her like small victories. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Inside, her hands trembled not from fear but from a strange, careful hope. She dialed her husband's number, and when he answered the line, she could barely hold back a laugh. "We did it," she said. "The car loan is gone." He breathed, and the sound was relief and disbelief braided together. For months they had followed the framework. Clear numbers, focused payments, tiny habit shifts, and now a weight lifted in a way neither spreadsheet nor pep talk had captured. The guide appears not as a distant expert now, but as a steady voice in their kitchen, reminding them of the rules they crafted together. Protect the emergency buffer, funnel extra income into the next target. Celebrate milestones without splurging the momentum away. Small rituals matter, he says, brushing coffee grounds into the sink, his tone soft but implacable. A weekly review, a 5-minute money meeting, a single automatic transfer that moves without drama. Maria imagines those tiny rituals like stepping stones across a river, one careful foot after another until the far bank is reachable. There are setbacks, a sudden medical bill, a freelance client who disappears. In a dim bedroom, Maria charts the new number and does the arithmetic out loud. We tighten here and extend that, and keep the snowball rolling. Her husband nods. They recalibrate. The drama in this scene is not despair but disciplined tenderness. Two people learning to treat money as truth-telling, not judgment. Neighbors notice a change in their walk. Friends ask, quietly, what's different? The momentum shows in small things. A calendar reminder that prevents late fees. A saved lunch at work that becomes another dollar toward freedom. You feel the shift. Anxiety becomes agency. The guide's voice reminds viewers that this is not miraculous luck but method repeated with patience. If this moment lands with you, give it a quiet thumbs up and tell me what number would you like to erase first. In the next part, we map the long game, investments, protection, and the habits that lock prosperity in for good. The lamp over the kitchen table spills warm light across a stack of bills and a laptop, the hum of the refrigerator like a steady heartbeat. You breathe in, and for the first time in months, the numbers no longer blur into a single terrifying line. At the center of the table sits a folded sheet, the plan you and your guide built together, Clear categories, dates, and one small, bold goal. The next debt to disappear. Across from you, your partner reaches for your hand and says, "We can do this." Not as a hopeful wish, but as a promise shaped by strategy. You both smile, careful and real. Flash to 2 weeks later. The first balance hits 0. You stare at the confirmation email, then laugh out loud. A small, surprised sound that fills the quiet of the living room. Your neighbor, who has been watching your gradual changes, knocks and says, "You look different." You realize how much the tension lifted from your shoulders, how your voice carries lighter now when you talk about money. It's not magic, it's momentum. There are setbacks. A car repair arrives like an uninvited guest. You sit with the choice. Dip into the emergency cushion you prioritized or postpone the repair and risk daily life. You call your guide. "Follow the guardrails," she says calmly. "Protect the fund. Adjust the timeline. Renegotiate if you can." You do. The repair is handled with less panic than before, and the guardrail holds. Week by week, a ritual forms. Saturday morning, coffee, 30 minutes to update the plan, celebrate a small win, and realign priorities. Kids grown, responsibilities heavy, you find a quiet pride in that ritual. Conversations that used to spark fights now start with, "What does the plan say?" and end in solutions. You begin to see how habits, the weekly check-in, automatic payments, renegotiated interest rates, are the real ladders out of the tunnel. If this feels like your reality, what is the single struggle that trips you most often? Drop it in the comments, because hearing your story helps shape the next steps for everyone. If this shift resonates, subscribe so you don't miss the final stage where we secure this new prosperity for good and make relapse impossible. The path ahead tightens. Soon you'll face the ultimate test that proves the change is lasting. You stand in the kitchen where this whole story began. The same worn table, the same mug with a crack on the rim, but the light falling through the window feels different now. It catches the edges of envelopes that used to be stacked like small, angry mountains and now sit in a neat, labeled tray. Paid, plan, build. You breathe in the ordinary sounds of life. The kettle's whisper, a neighbor mowing, a child laughing down the hall. Nothing miraculous happened overnight. What changed was a calm, steady plan and the courage to follow it. "I never thought we could see this," you say, voice low, touching a paper that used to mean worry. The guide, who has walked this path with hundreds of people, smiles from the doorway. "You didn't have to be perfect," they answer. "You only had to be persistent." In that exchange is the turning point. Shame softens into strategy, panic into small, intentional steps. You remember the long tunnel of sleepless nights and unanswered calls. You remember the moment you stopped avoiding the truth and wrote down every single number. From there, the method, honest accounting, a priority-driven budget, a frictionless debt paydown, and steady habit building, became less like a to-do list and more like a map. With each payment that crossed from due to done, momentum grew. The household began to plan for a future rather than scramble for the next bill. This is not about fast, risky fixes. It's about steady compounding of choices. A saved lunch here, an extra shift turned into a debt accelerator there. Conversations with your partner that replaced blame with partnership. It looks small in a single day and enormous across months. It is routine made heroic. If this video resonated, give it a like. A small click that tells me to make more of these practical guides. Tell me below, what's your biggest financial struggle? Share one line. I'll read them. If you want to keep walking this road together, subscribe and we'll take the next practical step. How to turn your newly freed cash into reliable, purposeful prosperity.